Welcome to Zoom Like a Pro. I'm Jennifer Blaze. I'm the ITS at Salem and Green Run High Schools. Today we're going to cover best practices in Zoom, adjusting your settings, breakout rooms, and screen sharing options. Best practices. So some of the best practices for video conferencing, whether it be in Zoom or another option, is to use your cameras in a well-lit place. Make sure that you're muting your mic when you're not the one speaking. Try to avoid having distractions by being in a quiet place where you have good lighting. Have an agenda. Make sure your invites have been set. And to check your systems in advance, play with the settings if you're not familiar with them, and have a good idea. It's also a good idea to set norms and expectations. Remember, school is completely changed for students and for us, so you really need to pretend like it's the beginning of the school year and reset norms and expectations for your students. Everyone is starting from an unknown place, so it's good just to have a fresh start. Define your objectives when you begin your meeting. Address any missing expectation or misexpectations in a timely manner with students. There's so much time in between when we see them, and it's not necessarily always on a regular basis. So don't wait for a week or so to go by before you address something that happened. Let them know so that they can correct their behavior, because like we said, this is new to everyone. And set communication expectations. If you want to hear from your students every day, then let them know that they need to check in with you every day. Whatever those expectations are, make sure that they have been clearly shared with the students. Alright, so let's blast off. Share settings in Zoom. There are a lot of options in Zoom. So some best practices for your security. There have been what is called Zoom bombers who jump into meetings on Zoom and take over the screen and post inappropriate things. So in order to avoid these, we want to make sure that waiting rooms are enabled. That feature should have, as of April 1st, been turned on for everyone, but we're going to go through all of our settings, and that's one we're going to make sure that we check for. We should be using passwords, turn off private chats, turn off screen sharing other than by the host, which would be the teacher, turn on remove uninvited participants and keep them from coming back in. Some more tips we want to think about is to not post your join code privately. That should be in your Schoology class or in an email to the students, but it should not be posted where everyone can see it, such as Twitter. If possible, have another teacher co-host, especially in the beginnings. If you want to see if an ITS or someone else can come in and be in the room with you and help you manage what's happening, then ask, because we're more than happy to help in any way we can. Lock your meeting once the students have all come in. And then we're going to go through some other settings, such as turning on the chime for the waiting room and muting everyone and annotations and different things like that. And I think one of the best things you can do is to practice with a friend or a coworker before you try this with students, and don't just go in blind. So we're going to take a closer look at the share settings. This is about a 15-minute process that we're going to go through. But go ahead and stop and pause this and go through it on Zoom on your own as I'm going through them. You only have to do this once, so this does take a minute, but making sure these are set up correctly is really important. Alright, we are going to look at logging into Zoom and then setting up the settings for our meetings so that we have the proper setting. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit sign in, and then I'm signing in with Google, and this is going to get me into our accounts, and all of the basic account limits have been lifted, so that's nice. I'm going to come over here to settings and set my settings. Now as of today, there are a few settings for educational accounts that are now defaulted to being on, such as waiting rooms, but we're going to look and we're going to make sure those things are actually enabled. So start meeting with host video on. That's a good one to have. Being able to see your participants when they come in, that can be on. That I'd also consider to be a safety setting, so that if, even though everything you're doing, still get someone to come into your meeting that wasn't, this will make it so that you have to see their face when they come in, and you'll know if that's not one of your students, and you'll be able to kick them out. So I would have participant video on as well. We do not want people to be able to join this before the teacher joins, before the host joins. So make sure this stays off. Do not turn this one on. This is one of the default ones that have been turned on. Require a password when scheduling a meeting. By using a password, only those people that you've given the password to will be able to join the meeting. So you want to use this password to make sure that you're not allowing other people in. Again, this is for scheduled meetings. This one is for impromptu meetings. You want them both turned on. Use the password. Take the time to create a password. Embed the password in the link so that they don't have to type the password in. I have a feeling that this is definitely more convenient, but if you were to turn this one off and require them to type the password in, it may take an extra step, but especially with high schoolers, they should be able to handle that. If you have smaller kids and you're trying to make it easier, I can see that too, but it would elevate your security by turning that off and requiring them to type in the password. Requiring a password for anyone joining by phone. Unless you know someone's joining by phone, I wouldn't even make that an option, but I would turn that on too so that they have some numeric version of a password that they have to enter. Mute participants when entering. It's etiquette on virtual conferences to mute your screen when you're not the one talking. So if you're not the host, you shouldn't come in with your mic on anyways. So I think it's good etiquette to just set it from there that they come in on mute, and then if they need to be unmuted, participants can unmute themselves. Receiving notifications, that's personal preference. This chat is the chat that everyone will be able to see. This is not private chat. This is visible for all participants. So if you're going to have them muted and you want them to be able to chat in the group chat, then you would leave this on. If you want chat turned off as well, that's up to you. Prevent participants from saving chat. That might be a good one to have on. I might turn that one on, but allow them to have chat, but not be able to save. That also is personal preference. Private chat. Allow participants to send private chats. I found this useful in professional meetings if I have a question just for one person to be able to do it. But from student to student, I think it would be best practice to probably have that turned off. It'll mitigate some of your distractions. Auto save chat is off. If you want it to save for you, then you'll need to turn that on. Play a sound when participants are joining or leaving. This one I think is nice, especially if you want to know when someone is coming into your chat and when leaving your chat. I would turn that on. Probably only needed for you to hear and not everyone, but that it would be personal preference for you. Transfer files. This is an interesting feature. Display end of meeting experience feedback. Basically, they can give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down at the end. They can also provide why they did a thumbs down if that need be, if you're interested in that. I would have some protocols for that if you decide that that's something you want to enable. Allowing the host to temporarily remove attendees from the meeting. So that's an option if someone were to pop into your meeting. We're going to do our best to keep people that shouldn't be in your meeting out, but by enabling that, you would have some control. Always show meeting control bar. That is an option. Show Zoom window during share. That is an option that you can turn on. or off. Share screen, a lot of what I'm talking about in the rest of this training is about share screen, and there's a lot of great features. I would leave that on, but you want that so that the only person that can share is the host. So that's something the district wants you to make sure you have on, particularly when you are working and in Zoom with students. So please make sure you enable only the host can share. If you're having a PLC meeting and multiple people are going to need to share, then you can leave it at all participants. But with students, you need to have hosts only. Make sure you hit save. You want to allow annotations in the whiteboard if you're going to use the whiteboard. You can also have it save whiteboard content when you stop sharing. So if you are going to continue something that you did on the whiteboard later in another chat, for example, if you're a math teacher and you're working on a problem and you guys are going to come back to it and you want to be able to save that, I would turn that on. So remote control is great if you are having a one-on-one session with a student or a parent and you're trying to help them to work on something and you want to be able to take control of things on their computer. You can do that with remote control. So during screen sharing, the person who is sharing can allow others to control and share content. I would only use this remote control if it's a very controlled atmosphere and you are trying to help someone do something on their computer. I wouldn't have this in a group setting with students or teachers, so remote control can be off unless you are in one of those unique situations. Nonverbal feedback is great if you're going to have students muted and you want them to be able to raise their hand or click on an icon to participate. Allow removed participants to rejoin. If you remove them, this would allow them to come back in. It's default off. So in a meeting, you have some options. One is to use breakout rooms, and one is that remote support that I was mentioning before, where you can give control of your screen to another participant. You cannot have both of these on, but for the most part, breakout rooms is something you might want to consider, and unless you're doing a one-on-one remote, you would leave this off and just turn this on if you were having a one-on-one meeting and needed to give them some support. So I keep this one off. I am going to give you some tutorial on breakout rooms in just a minute in this slideshow. So this is where you would come to turn those breakout rooms on. Allow the host to assign participant. This gives the teacher control over putting students into the rooms. Breakout rooms are great. I think the one drawback is if students are in a room, maybe you have 4 groups of 4, you can pop from room to room, but you can't see or have control over what's happening in those rooms when you're not in them. Make sure you know your students, have a conversation about discipline, and although we're not in school, they can still be up for disciplinary actions if they do something inappropriate. I'm not saying you have to use breakout rooms, I'm just saying that it's an option. And here's how you would do it. Closed captioning, if you have students with that need or you just want it on to have that available, there's closed captioning. You can save that closed captioning in transcripts. If you're recording your meeting and you want those closed captions to stay on it, that's an option there. Allowing others to take control of your camera during a meeting, not a great idea, leave that off. Virtual background is a fun option that you can turn on, and it's defaulted on. In your camera options, you can allow green screening, and even if you don't have a green screen, if you have a solid background, you can put some fun images up and give yourself butterfly wings or a dragon head or who knows, something fun. So that's a fun option. Definitely not necessary, but something fun to do. These are some sound options. Waiting room, it doesn't look like it's enabled yet, but it should default be on in your settings. If it's not, this is definitely something you want to check that it's on. What waiting rooms allows you to do is you have to give permission for people to join. So this is something that the district really wants you using and should, as I said, be defaulted on. And so when you're in the meeting, you'll get a little sound like that tells you that the meeting is happening. You will then allow them to come. So it's just like at home, someone rings the doorbell, you open the door. And that's what's happening with the waiting room. They join the meeting, they're not actually in, they ring the doorbell, you let them in. It can get a little bit hectic as people are joining, but it is definitely a good safety precaution just in case somebody gets the code to your meeting. You have control. So make sure that you know the name of the person that's entering so that nobody gets into your room that should not be in there. We do not want anyone bypassing the Zoom application process, so leave that off. Email notifications when attendees join a meeting, when a meeting is canceled, I have those on. Email language options. Nobody should be scheduling anything on your behalf, so I would leave that off. I think a lot of that's a paid plan anyways. Alright, those are your settings. I would take time to go through these and make sure you have on what you want on. Make sure those privacy settings are turned on. Please make sure that screen sharing should be the host only. Disable join before the host. Enable a co-host so you can assign others to help. That is something that if you have another teacher joining to help you is a good option. Disable file transfer so that no digital viruses can be shared. Disable allow removed participants to rejoin so that if you boot someone, they can't come back in. So those are things that we talked about throughout this, but those are things that the division in particular is highlighting that will keep Zoom bombers from joining in and sharing anything. What they're doing is they're coming in and they're taking over screens and putting up things to disturb your meeting, inappropriate content, violent content. We want to make sure those things are not happening in meetings. It's been in the news. It's been all over social media. We need to make sure that we're using waiting rooms and only allowing the host to have control of the meetings so that things like that don't happen. Take the time to look at these share settings. To go back in and mess with those too much, so I know this took a second, but it will be worth it. There are also some additional share settings that we mentioned in the video, but if you wanted to look at those again, they are linked here. We are going to look a little more in depth into some of those advanced features such as breakout rooms and screen sharing briefly. So breakout rooms, you can pre-assign students to the rooms. The rooms can be set to close at a specific assigned time. So you can say, I'm going to put you into rooms for 10 minutes, discuss this topic, and then we're going to come back together, and then you can broadcast to all of the rooms and say, 1 minute left or ending or something like that, or don't forget this, but it'll broadcast to everyone.
Hey everyone, Farah from Zoom here. On this brief video, we're going to show you how you can leverage our breakout room feature to take a large meeting or virtual classroom and split it up into smaller groups or sessions. You'll see that I have already enabled the breakout room feature, which you can find in your settings along the bottom. And that breakout room button will actually be right here. This is a button that only your hosts or co-hosts will be able to see. And right now we don't have a co-host in the session. If I manage my participants, I can hover over Catherine, for example, to make her a co-host. So she'll see this button now as well. When we're ready to split the group into smaller sessions, I can easily click this button to get a pop-up window asking me how many rooms I'd like to assign out and how many participants per room. For this example, it's recommending since there are 6 people, we can split it up into 2 rooms. I can do this automatically or manually. So if we click on the automatic button, it'll generate those breakout rooms for us. Certainly if there's anyone I want to swap out, maybe I want to move Michael to the other room, I can exchange him for a different participant. Once I'm ready to open all rooms, I'll click this Open All Rooms button, and our participants will be able to join the sessions that we've created for them. So we'll slowly see those people join. One thing that's really important to note is that as a host or a co-host, you can actually hop between the different rooms to talk to the participants. You can see here I have the join button. Now everybody's left to go to the rooms. I can broadcast a message to everybody and say, wrapping up in 1 minute. And this will broadcast the message. And then I can close the rooms, which gives them a 1 minute timer to rejoin our session. We'll give everybody a second to rejoin, and I'll show you 1 or 2 additional features with breakout rooms. There we go. We can kind of see everybody kind of popping back in. Now everybody's rejoined the main session. You'll see that I have the opportunity to reopen these rooms again, which is really great. If you have a very long session or a very long virtual class, you can split into these virtual smaller groups as often as you'd like. And the additional options here will allow you to automatically close breakout rooms after a specified amount of time. You can also change the countdown timer to be 30 seconds or 2 minutes if you like. I'll show you a setting where you can also pre-assign folks to be in your breakout room before the classroom starts. You'll want to navigate over to the class that's already been created in your Zoom portal. Under the Meetings tab, you can find your meeting. Scrolling all the way to the bottom, you'll see if we open this to re-edit it, I have the opportunity to pre-assign a breakout room here, and I can create the rooms and upload a CSV with all of my participants in advance so that their names are already populated in the room when I start the session. That's basically how you can run breakout rooms. We hope you found this video helpful. If you have any additional questions, please visit us at support.zoom.us. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
All right, so that's breakout rooms. Something that she didn't show explicitly, but is good to know, the teacher also has the option to join rooms and jump around from room to room, so you can kind of monitor what is happening within those rooms. You cannot see what's happening in a room, though, unless you are in it. So I would have someone who is in charge of monitoring each room, either an adult or a student who you trust and will give you the correct lowdown on what's happening in those rooms. So that is my big caution with this, is you don't necessarily know what's happening. You can't see their chats or have a recording of what's happening in those rooms. So keep it brief so that students aren't getting off task. Just be cautious. The other thing that is interesting are the share settings, particularly the whiteboard, but there are a lot of other share settings that are kind of neat to know about. The annotation tools are automatically appear, so you'll have those. This is another quick video.
In this video, you'll learn how to share content within a Zoom meeting. Simply select Share Screen at the bottom of your meeting window to get started. From here, you'll be given various options for sharing, such as sharing your full desktop or an individual application you have open on your computer. You can also access advanced sharing options and the ability to share an individual file from a specific location as well. If you're planning to share content that contains audio, such as a third-party video, be sure to select Share Computer Sound in the bottom left-hand corner to ensure that your participants can hear your computer sound as you're sharing. When you're ready, select Share on the right-hand side. Once content sharing begins, you can always stop the share to stop sharing content with others at any time. If you need to pause the share to take a momentary break or prepare other materials, this is an option as well. Or, if you'd like to share a new piece of content, you can simply select New Share and select another piece of content for a seamless
Up here at the top, you also have an annotation tool. So if you wanted to write on your screen while you're sharing something to point something out, that's another neat feature that you have. So I'm going to show you these screens here quickly and talk about some features. So this is the first option that you have, which is the basic share screen option, where you can share a whiteboard, you can share an image and upload your iPhone or iPad. You can also share the screen on your computer or one of the applications that you have open. In the advanced features, you can show just a portion of your screen. So if there's something you want to focus in on, or you have your screen split, you can show them just the side or the portion that you want to show them. You can have your computer sound only, so if you're playing an audio clip, you can have that go through. And I know there were some math teachers that took home a secondary camera, like, well, in elementary school we used to call them Lampy, but cameras to do math work on. You can also share your lamps. The other thing you have is to share files, and you have access to your Google Drive. The division would prefer you were not sharing them here. Share those in Schoology. That way, if it's not something that came from Google or something, we're not sharing any viruses from one computer to another. So with the files, go ahead and share those within Schoology and refer them back there. So my best advice for you is to take the time to set some norms and decide how you want your classes to go, and have that maybe in a document where the students can see those ahead of time and in the beginning of your meetings. Change your settings ahead of time. Make sure that you've gone through and taken time to go through all of those settings, because there are a lot. And then most importantly, I think, other than sharing the privacy settings, is playing around in the program and before you jump in with students. So get a colleague or a family member or someone to go into a Zoom meeting with you and just practice and be familiar before you go ahead and do this with students. So I thank you. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions.